Welcome into a brand new edition of the Sports Hub Patriots podcast. Day 3 of training camp, done with the first block of practices with the day off coming up on Saturday. So we've definitely got a lot to get to. Joining us for this episode from CLNS Media is Taylor Kyles. Taylor, welcome to the show and welcome to New England, your first season on the beat.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, it's been really exciting. Everybody, including you, have been so incredibly welcoming. It's surreal finally being on the field after years of just following on Twitter and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start here. This is generally more of a day-to-day show, but again, the Patriots had a block of 3 practices, and we will get to today's practice specifically, but this feels like a good point to kind of catch our breath, collect our thoughts. 3 days in, what has been your big takeaway about this team so far?
Biggest takeaway would be the secondary is very competitive. Now, it's been exclusively red zone work, specifically in the low red zone where they spent most of these periods. There's not a lot of space to work with. It favors the defense, and that's where you really see the great offenses separate themselves. And understandably, the offense hasn't looked great. For the most part, that's been due to the fact that, like Gesicki's kind of touched on and Hunter Henry have touched on, it's trust, it's timing, it's communication, and being on the same page. And this is a new system. Hunter Henry and Mac Jones, like Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, they've been together for a while, but they're still learning a new offense. And then you're incorporating guys like Juju and Gesicki, who have had successful NFL careers, and we've seen a lot of them, and we pretty much know who they are at this point. But, there's a lot of moving parts. But even still, the secondary has been very competitive. I think today is, Christian Gonzalez has been consistently very good. You don't always necessarily see him at the catch point because, they're not always throwing at him, but there's times where he's still smothering guys, even when he's not getting the ball thrown to him. And there have been some receptions he's given up, what you expect. He's still a rookie. He's learning, as Patriots say, it's day to day, always getting better. But especially today, you saw guys like Marcus Jones and John Jones, who you always think of as they're undersized guys. You don't really want them pitted against guys who are 6 feet tall. Patriots have a lot of those guys where you expect them to be more jump ball specialists who are going to win those 50-50 situations. That you saw Marcus Jones, where as competitive as he was last year, and it seemed like he was always in position. The Bengals game was kind of the banner for this, where he's still losing at the catch point because he's just not big enough and he's not long enough. If he had his athleticism at 6 feet tall, he would have been a first-round pick, no question. But today, you saw Marcus Jones defend a pass against Hunter Henry on a jump ball. You saw Jonathan Jones twice, actually, against Devontae Parker, where it was a jump ball. Parker had the ball in his hands, and Jonathan Jones with that trademark, feistiness where he doesn't stop and he fights until the whistle's blown. He's trying to get the ball out until Parker gets to the ground and dislodges it before Parker can finish the process of the catch, whatever that means. And you see him get the ball out. And then he had really good coverage against Tyquan Thornton as well on a corner route. So it's really impressed me. You want to see the offense make plays because of how bad they were last season. And I understand that it's frustrating when you're hearing, the offense is still getting it together, but, the defense is winning these practices. But not only are the practices geared towards this defense, but it's a stacked unit. So if the defense wasn't having success, I think it would be more concerning. And you'd kind of be sounding more alarm bells because that's not a guarantee. Nothing's ever a guarantee. But that's the unit you have a lot of faith in. So, yeah, I would say the biggest headline is the secondary is as advertised, especially with Gonzalez, who you still aren't positive what he is at the professional level, but he hasn't been out of place by any metric. And even with Jack Jones kind of falling out of the first group, you've seen Marcus Jones step up and look good both outside and inside.
So I wanted to dig a little deeper into Christian Gonzalez, and I wrote about this today after practice on 985thesportshub.com for people who want to check it out. I think just based on what we saw in college, what we saw through the pre-draft process, all that, like this guy's an NFL corner. I don't think that there's a question that he belongs. To me, it's more about that learning curve that comes for any rookie, even first overall pick, any position is going to have to deal with. There are nuances at the NFL level that you just don't see in college. And I thought Gonzalez, so the question for me with Gonzalez is, how long is that learning curve for him? Is it the whole season? Is it 6 months? Is it 3 months? Does he get there by the end of camp? And it's not that he wasn't good the first 2 days, but I thought today in what was a more competitive practice. So they were in shirts and shorts the first 2 days. Today they put on the shells. So it's like halfway between shirts and shorts and full pads, but there's a little more contact. It's a little more up tempo. He had, just as one example, but he had a really good rep working against Tyquan Thornton, where Thornton ran, I don't know what it was an over, but it wasn't an over because they were in low red zone, but it was that same kind of idea where he ends up along the end line and nobody's open. Mac breaks out of the pocket and comes back towards Thornton to try to extend the play, and Thornton came to break back in. And Thornton actually, Thornton hasn't had a great camp, but he made a great sight adjustment right there to kind of break off his route and come back and help Mac Jones. You know who made the same adjustment at the same time? Christian Gonzalez. And that's something that you're not going to see receivers do a lot in college, especially in the Pac-12 where Gonzalez has been, where he saw this, he recognized it, and he mentally and physically, he was able to make the play to stick with Thornton. Ultimately, Thornton never got open. And I think Mac actually ended up completing it on the backside, but like Thornton was never an option on the play. Things like that. That's why it was such a big day for Thornton, because you sort of touched on it there. It's not just that he was competitive at the catch point. He was, but he was making plays where the ball wasn't even coming in his direction. I was watching him a lot today, regardless of where the ball went. And frankly, I missed a lot because the ball never went towards him because he was covering the guy so well. So when you go back to that learning curve, I think that's really exciting because you're starting to see, and it's come and go. Like Juju definitely got him a couple times yesterday, but you're starting to see him pick up on some of those things that he's going to see at the next level and start to handle them like a professional.
And the transition shouldn't be that tough, relatively speaking. You know, if your quarterback is the second hardest position to play, probably the most difficult physically. And obviously when you're playing NFL receivers, like you said, they're going to have nuances that you just don't see at the lower level because these receivers don't have the experience. That said, the system that Gonzalez was in at Oregon is very similar to what the Patriots run. So conceptually, it's like we've heard a lot from players when we ask, like, oh, what's it like working with Bill O'Brien? It's like, it's football's football. You're really just speaking different languages, and it's more about the communication aspect. So conceptually, he's got that advantage of not really having to like learn a brand new necessarily system where, you know, some defenses just play a lot of cover 2. You know, the best Patriots defenses just played a lot of cover 1, but he understands different concepts, different adjustments and things like that that are going to allow him to be more comfortable. And you see it in his college tape, especially his last season, where he trusts his athleticism. Like you don't see him panic really ever because he knows I'm not only am I fast enough to recover downfield if I have to, but he's got the length and the fluidity that he can also recover just in terms of positioning. And if he's behind a step, if that ball is not away where he can't make a play on it, like if you put it in the receiver's gut and he's a step behind, he's long enough that he can still make a play. So yeah, I think that you're going to see him. That's one of the reasons I think you've seen him transition so quickly, is because he's able to come into a system that he has some familiarity with. And he's got all these veteran players. But we're also asking all these guys like John Jones and whatnot, what do you sing from Gonzalez? And they're saying, yeah, like, you know, he's talking. We're learning more about him. He's getting more comfortable. You got all these guys who have been in the system for at least 2 years. Many of them have been in the system longer than that, who can tell him, you know, like you are kind of the odd man out in terms of you don't have reps with us. And then they can help him get on the same page instead of, you know, having multiple new players where, you know, like we saw when Stephon Gilmore first got to New England, where it took a while for them to get to their really straight man concepts because they were playing a lot of soft zone because it's hard to do that match principles they like where, okay, this guy's going across the field. I'm going to jump off and trade assignments and you pick him up. You know, all those kind of intricacies that can be hard to pick up on. Gonzalez is learning from a lot of really smart veteran guys while also kind of being a step ahead and just being the best athlete on the field pretty much at all times.
All right, so while we're on the defense, like I said, I think Gonzalez was the best player on the field today, but through 3 days, it goes to Kyle Duggar. Did have his interception streak snap today, so I don't know, maybe he's sliding, but no, he's been very good. Your impressions of Kyle Duggar through 3 days?
It's hard to evaluate someone like him because of how physical he is and what a big part of his game that is. Like once we start seeing run periods, that's when you're going to start hearing Kyle Duggar. I will say the interceptions, the one he had yesterday, like, yes, he had an interception, but Mac Jones threw it directly to him with no one in the area.
Hit him between the numbers, yeah.
And Mac knew it was a bad throw, went down immediately to get push-ups. Like, those are the ones where Mac, for the most part, doesn't do that in games. Like, he also did it in minicamp or OTAs where it's like, yeah, okay, he's kind of forcing it, but he also understands the situation and there's no real ramifications for that other than having to do those push-ups. But, I mean, you're seeing the versatility. You're seeing his athleticism. I guess I don't have, like, the best evaluation again because you know me, I'm a film guy and I really I don't like to just say things when I've only seen one rep or you know if I've kind of just seen the tail end of something. But I mean, Duggar's definitely not standing out for any bad reasons. You know, you're not seeing him get picked on by Gesicki or Hunter Henry or anything like that. And obviously someone who has a lot of time in the system. Hopefully the idea is that this year, even some of the mental mistakes he had last season where his eye discipline wasn't always great and you would see him sometimes lose track of receivers, which was the only time you really saw him get burned. You're hoping maybe that can get mitigated, but like you're not seeing that. in the practices that we've seen so far. So, I can't give an in-depth take on Duggar, but from what I've seen, I mean, he's been Duggar, which is obviously a very good sign.
All right, let's jump over to the offensive side of the ball. We're going to get to the quarterbacks. We're going to get to the running backs, but I want to start with the wide receivers. I know you've got a take. I've got a take on a guy a little further down the depth chart, but we'll begin with that group of four. And Thornton, Bourne, Parker, Smith-Schuster. And I really feel like it's been a tale of two camps if you split that group up. The bigger receivers, the more physical receivers, Parker, Smith-Schuster, they've gotten off to a good start. Devontae Parker, a couple highlight catches yesterday, and again, they've been in red zone, those 50-50 jump ball, contested catch type situations. He's been excellent. Juju yesterday, kind of the same thing where he's just being more physical in the corners. Meanwhile, Kendrick Bourne, Tyquan Thornton, a little slower coming along. Now, those guys are generally field stretchers, so you're not stretching the field when you're snapping the ball at the 4. But personally, I look at a guy in Thornton, and what do we make of his lack of catches, right? And he was asked about it today, and he said camp's not about the number of catches. It's about getting better and being competitive. But I look at it, I don't think it's a sign that he's bad. I think we're coming into this year and expecting this to be like a bellwether year. Is he a player? Is he not? He's not a red zone guy. Like, that's never been his skill set. He's a burner. He's a field stretcher. He's a guy that you're throwing the ball to 20 yards down the field, and you can't do that from the 4. At the same time, especially in the wake of them losing out on DeAndre Hopkins, I think there has been a lot of talk about, well, who's going to emerge as that number 1 in Thornton as the 50th overall pick, as the youngest guy with the highest ceiling, has kind of been circled as that guy. And you want your number 1 receiver to be able to produce in the red zone. He doesn't need to be their best red zone guy. They've got some great red zone players in Parker and Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki, but I don't think it says anything about Thornton's floor that he's not producing right now. But I do wonder, all right, if he really was going to be that number 1 wide receiver, I wonder if he'd be doing more in these periods right now, in these red zone periods right now.
Yeah, and that actually came up when we spoke to Thornton after practice, and he was saying, I've had good reps in. Like, I'm not really worried about not getting a lot of targets. So he seems to think that, and obviously, I don't think he's going to say that if the coaches are dogging him when they get back into the building and they're watching the game film. So for him to say something like that, I think it's encouraging. When you think of the red zone, yeah, you think of like these big bodies, and I think Thornton does have the ability to separate in the red zone. Like we saw in the preseason, I think against the Browns last year. I'm not sure if it was them, but
that was the regular season, the touchdown from Bailey Zappi.
Yep, so where you can see that he's got that quickness at the top of the route where he can separate and he can get open, kind of more towards the back of the end zone where, a lot of the time we saw it with like Dorsett and Amendola when they were here, where it's really run to the back and then the guy doesn't know whether you're going inside or out, and then you just sell one way, go the other. That's how Thornton's going to win in the red zone. So it makes sense that really all these targets are going to Hunter Henry, who's been their most reliable guy, someone I've been high on and saying that now that he's got a good offensive coordinator again, and if he's healthy, Hunter Henry is going to be one of their best weapons, and he may not excite you a lot because he's not, Travis Kelce, where he's super fluid and great after the catch, but he's still a good route runner. He's going to create separation at the top, and then Mac Jones is going to be able to get on the ball. So Hunter Henry's been your consistent guy. A lot of throws have gone to Devontae Parker, and in a lot of those instances, the defenders know what kind of route they're going to run. Like we saw yesterday where Mac threw 4 straight throws to the back pylon. And after the first one was well covered. But after that, it seemed like the defenders knew exactly what was coming. And they were like very quickly, once the route broke, they were looking back for the ball. So, there's a lot of context that needs to be added to this. And again, these are periods that do favor the defense. So it feels like they're really just trying to get their big guys involved and see like what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses. We've heard a lot of talk about them, just correction. Like Juju was saying, it's really been a lot of fixing, seeing what they do well. Gesicki mentioned that they're not scheming anything right now. Like they're just kind of going out there and installing plays, and they're going to build from there. So yeah, like you said, I don't think Tyquan Thornton not being productive is terribly significant. We saw the Devontae Parker, once they got to the high red zone yesterday, the first play, you see Mac throw it up for him and he catches a touchdown. You saw the first play of 7-on-7s today when they were kind of backed up a little bit further. You saw Hunter Henry make a catch over, I believe it was Peppers.
It's Adrian Phillips. Adrian Phillips. That back
Phillips.
Shoulder one you're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah, that's best catch of the day. Yep.
Yep, that was fantastic. So those are the guys in the red zone that you're hoping step up. Gesicki, he hasn't been productive, but he also hasn't had a lot of targets. And without, game film, it's hard to say whether he's missing opportunities or whether he's just not playing well, whatever. But yeah, I wouldn't put too much stock into not hearing a lot from Tyquan Thornton at this part of the training camp.
Real quick on Gesicki, it's interesting to me. I feel like he hasn't been on the field a ton. And we kind of expected them to be, heavy in 12 personnel, and they haven't. I don't know if that's just where they're at in their install. I don't know if that's them not wanting to tip their hand, but I feel like I haven't, maybe it's just he really hasn't stood out, but I feel like he hasn't gotten as many reps, and it's, or even if they're going to be in 11, they're going to be alternating Henry and Gesicki. I think it's very clear right now that Hunter Henry is tight end 1.
Yeah, I think it might be kind of a trickle-down effect from we only saw 12 personnel in OTAs and minicamp when all they had were really 2 wide receivers. And now we're seeing a lot of, like, obviously there's a ton of different receiver combinations they're using, but it's clear they're trying to get Juju involved. There's also some snaps that are going to Demario Douglas. They're trying to get Tyquan on the field. So I don't want to just say that they're only trying to get the receivers involved. I'm sure it's more nuanced than that. I have no idea what's going on, but I can't see Gesicki not being a big part of what they do offensively. So my guess is that they're really just trying to give Tyquan and Juju the reps that they missed out on earlier in these sessions. Maybe I would say maybe that's the biggest thing. We also, I don't know, we can't really talk about scheme, but they do have some packages where it seems like they're going to be using their kind of run personnel to set up different things. So yeah, I really think we're going to see what their, maybe not their plan is for the entire season, but maybe more of their offensive identity or what they want it to be once the pads come on. There's the full field and there's more situational football outside of just, you have at max 20, 30 yards of space to work with. Now let's try to see what the guys who are going to be a big part of our offense ideally, but didn't get a lot of reps can do. And Hunter Henry's your only consistent Y presence. Matt Sokol has been pretty good, but I'm not going to say that he's somebody that you want on the field a lot at Y. So it's really hard to get Hunter Henry off the field at all. And then even saying that, I think we've also seen Gesicki in some of the clear receiver formations. He's on the field sometimes instead of Hunter Henry. So I think they're really just trying to work out different groupings and different formations and, like I said, get those guys more involved at the receiver position.
Yeah, I think you hit on it there where Bill's talked about this is kind of still an extension of the spring. And Juju wasn't out there, Thornton wasn't out there a ton, and trying to get those guys their reps. You did mention Demario Douglas, and that 5th wide receiver battle is getting interesting. Douglas has been very good. He's been involved. He's super quick, which they need.
Yeah.
I thought it's weird. I thought Kayshon Boutte had his best day today, but he also dropped 2 passes. He did a great job twice of getting himself open in tight coverage and giving the quarterback a window, and he just didn't complete the catch. So that's progress, but we'll see if he gets there. Same thing sort of with Trey Nixon. He ran a really great route against Jack Jones during 11s in the red zone, but Bailey Zappi just led him a little bit too much and let him out of bounds, so it was technically incomplete, but he definitely gave him a window. But yeah, I know you're high on Douglas. I'm high on Douglas. It feels like so yesterday, this was kind of a little thing, but when the team was doing a kickoff drill, a special teams drill, the quarterbacks went over to the side field with Juju, Tyquan, Devontae Parker, Kendrick Bourne, the top 4 receivers, and nobody else. And yes, Demario Douglas plays special teams, but is he focusing more on special teams because he needs to make the roster? I think Douglas is the leader for that 5th spot right now. But, is that 5th spot on the roster? Last year, we spent a lot of time talking about the 5th spot in the battle between Trey Nixon, Lil Jordan Humphrey, and Christian Wilkerson. And then wouldn't you know it, none of them made the team. So I feel like the gap between 4 and 5 is still significant, but it does feel like Demario Douglas is positioning himself very well for when the pads come on to get extended reps and make more of a push towards a roster spot.
Absolutely. And he gives you something they don't really have. Tyquan Thornton is your longer speed guy who does have quickness, but I think Demario is the guy who can give you true explosiveness after the catch. I think Juju's going to be relied on primarily in that role, and I think he does have more juice than a lot of the other receivers on their roster. But Douglas, I think the fact that he's been as involved as he is, once you see some of the top offensive players on that far field, the fact that he's involved at all with them and you're not seeing somebody like Kayshon Boutte, who was much more highly praised in college and had overall, I would say, considering his level of competition, a better college career. But we've seen it pretty consistently that he isn't finishing the plays. We're seeing him make these great adjustments where it's a high point ball and he's twisting and, it looks good, but he's not coming down with the catch. Versus a Demario Douglas, where, yes, a lot of his work, to be fair, has been underneath, where also to his credit, you're seeing he's got that, he hits top speed really quickly, and you see the acceleration that gets you excited, and I think is going to get him on the roster. Whether it's okay, we're going to use him primarily on special teams, but he's going to be a gadget guy for us because he's got the quickness and he's really good after the catch. We also saw he was targeted against Jack Jones. Now, Jack Jones has been more with the second group, but he's been dominant. Like, he's having multiple pass breakups every single day because we know that his talent level, like, he's much better than a backup. But when Demario Douglas was targeted today on kind of a high point ball, he caught it over Jack Jones, which you don't expect from a guy who's 5'8". Jack Jones isn't the biggest guy in the world, but he's 5'11", and he's fairly long. I don't know if Douglas got both of his speed in. That was like really far away. It was pretty much impossible to see. But even still, seeing somebody of his size come down with the catch, like the footwork and all that, like that's something that you work on more at the NFL level because, college you only need 1 foot in. That's something a lot of these guys, it takes some kind of transition. But the fact that he was able to show that skill set, and then Belichick mentioned before practice that he was a smart kid who is very good, not only in the return game, but has the versatility to play inside and out, which you don't often hear from guys his size. Like Danny Amendola was not playing outside receiver with the Pats. He was almost exclusively in the slot unless it was some special package where they're in a bunch and he's technically the outside receiver, but really, he's just kind of being protected against the jam. So seeing what we saw from Douglas today and hearing the comments from Belichick, it really makes me think that they're going to give him every opportunity to earn a role on the team. And even going further back, when you think about the Shrine Bowl, where they got to work with him and Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers only practiced, I believe, 1 day and then sat out. And then Demario Douglas went off. The staff was extremely impressed with him. And to my knowledge, I think they held him out of the game because they were like, we know what you are. You're good. We're not going to try to subject you to injury.
He was actually dealing with an injury at the okay. He was dealing with an injury at the other. But no, it's funny you mentioned that because before the Patriots drafted him, me and Evan Lazar were out there, and Evan was on the podcast yesterday. If you haven't checked it out, subscribe to the Patriots audio feed, wherever you get your podcasts, or check out the Sports Hub YouTube channel. We were out there, and we kind of, day one, we saw Demario Douglas, and we looked at him, and we said, that's day 3 Zay Flowers. I forget who day 2 Zay Flowers. Oh, it's Tank Dell. So it was Zay Flowers was day 1 Zay Flowers. And then you had Tank Dell.
Texans steal everybody I love. The Texans steal everybody I love. I swear. It's so
every year I want that. I wanted Tank. And look, they got Demario Douglas. I'm happy about that. But I wanted Tank Dell. I wanted Kadarius Toney. I wanted, who was it last year? Not Calvin Austin. I don't know why I'm blanking on that. Wan'Dale Robinson.
Yeah.
And they finally got that guy. I'll say this on Douglas, like you kind of touched on his role there. I think the most exciting thing for me about him is, for all we want to bemoan their offense last year, and there's plenty to get on them for, the Marcus Jones package was very effective. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is you can't run the Marcus Jones package a lot because to run the Marcus Jones package, you need Marcus Jones. And he's made it clear, they've made it clear, he is a defensive back first. And he'll do some things on offense, but his primary focus is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. Offense is just going to be a part-time thing.
And probably as a returner. Like, he's been the first
and a returner, right?
Yeah. Mix, but yeah, that's a lot of snaps that he'd have to be playing. And I'm pretty sure that Douglas said that he modeled his game after Marcus Jones. And there's one play he had in college where it's identical. Literally identical to the screen that he caught against Buffalo where Marcus Jones took it to the house. Very similar players. So, yeah, I like you bring that up.
When I talked, and it kind of builds to my point, when I talked to Demario Douglas at the Shrine Bowl, so this is before he's drafted by the Patriots, and now he knew I was from New England, but I said, are there any guys you watch? I think I might have said, actually, are there any guys you watch, especially, in the Patriots offense, having worked in it, that in the past, that you've modeled your game after? And he said his 2 favorite players to watch were Marcus Jones and Julian Edelman, and he wasn't a Patriot yet. So that brings me to the point. How do you run the Marcus Jones package without having Marcus Jones available? You go find the closest thing to Marcus Jones who can play offense, and that's Demario Douglas, very similar as a ball carrier. So I think like that to me is his path on the roster. I don't know that he's going to be like a full-time wide receiver, although I thought it was very interesting today that Bill Belichick talked about his versatility and his ability to play inside and outside, because I didn't see him as an outside receiver. But you have him do some of that orbit motion stuff that Marcus Jones was doing last year. He's going to crush it in that role.
And the exciting thing is he is a gadget guy. Like, he's got speed, he's got quickness. Yeah. Like, those are always good gadget guys. But he's also a good route runner. That was what really surprised me when I'm like, all right, this is a 6th-round pick. I was kind of late, like, watching a lot of the draft picks. So the guys who were on day 3, I knew some of them, like the linemen I was familiar with, but then, like, Demario Douglas was not on my radar necessarily. Watching him, I was shocked to watch how physical he can be in routes. Like, yes, he's undersized, but he also is 190 now. And when you think of, like, a Danny Amendola, like, those are smaller guys, but Amendola was like 200 pounds. So you have to have a certain level of bulk. And then the play style, like even if you add the weight, do you have the play style to let it translate to the field? Not only do you see like the head fakes and the changing in speed and pace that you like in good route runners, but also he's swiping guys away, like he's leaning in and getting off. It's not just, you're going to feed him touches that are easy. He's a good route runner as well. So if he can earn time on the field, it's not just the Marcus Jones package. I think they can put him out there and be like, all right, you can run the same stuff that Juju can run. Maybe they want to kind of ease him into it because you have so many veterans ahead of him who can take that space. But if Demario Douglas is making plays, and like I said, he's kind of building. This was his first really big day where you saw him make a significant impact. If he can be that guy, or at least have a significant role when they put the pads on, and you see, all right, like he's not just someone that we're going to feed it to. He's a multidimensional guy. I think that's where the hype train's really going to leave the station. But his stock is definitely rising.
Right. Well, that's where I'm at with him. It's like he does that gadget Marcus Jones stuff for now, and then as his game builds up, that role expands to a more complete role. What'd you make of Bill saying that he can play on the outside? Because we didn't see him do that a lot at Shrine Bowl. I don't believe he did it a ton in college. Obviously, a smaller guy, not built like an outside receiver. What'd you make of that?
Yeah, he did it at times in college. Now, I don't think he's going to be out there a ton. Again, I think it's going to be one of those things where maybe he's in bunches, and there's certain sets where it's like early down, they're playing cover 3. We're going to get him a matchup where he's outside, but no one's going to try to jam him because they're playing a soft zone. I think that's really where the matchup is.
Yeah.
But if you're playing like the Patriots, where they have a lot of undersized corners and guys where he can win because he's a good route runner and their physicality isn't really a factor, that's where I think, he's still very fast too. He's like a 4.4 guy. So he's got speed as well. So if you think that he can win outside on a go route, threaten on a comeback or something like that, I think you can line him up outside as well. Again, I would say at max, especially as a rookie, you're going to see that like 25, 30% of the time. And it's going to be kind of scheme dependent. And I think he's going to live inside. But even still, having somebody who has that flexibility, like Bill doesn't talk that way about Amendola. He didn't talk that way about West necessarily. Those were slot-only players. Edelman kind of broke that mold where it's, you think he's only a slot guy, but he's also, whether it's motioning into the stack or whatever, doesn't really matter. You can still use him and put him in places where the defense doesn't know where he's going to be every play.
All right, couple more things I want to touch on here on the offense before we wrap it up and look ahead, Taylor. Tackle position, sort of a big development today. It had been Riley Reif at right tackle the first 2 days. Today, and it was for a non-padded practice. Like, don't put a ton of weight onto this because you need the pads to truly evaluate the lineman, but you wouldn't exactly say Riley Reif checked every box through the first 2 days. And then we start to see Connor McDermott out there today, built more like a Patriots right tackle, has been in the system. What'd you make of that switch?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I wonder how much of it is, not maybe wanting a rotation because Riley Reif is up there in age. I don't think that they believe Riley Reif is going to play every single snap at right tackle for them. It's just, that's kind of a pipe dream. Even if he were to stay healthy, I don't think that's really your best case scenario. So I wouldn't be surprised, especially early in the season. Like, we know they like to experiment, do some funky stuff where you see it live and you're like, what in the world are they thinking? This
season starts in October. Bill loves to say that.
Exactly. So I wouldn't be surprised because we've seen it also in minicamp and OTAs that they were kind of rotating the right tackle spot. City So even got reps out there. So I think maybe it's, McDermott was the right tackle as a starter for a while, obviously was more backup caliber, like at the very bottom, if you're going to say starter or anything like that. I don't think you want him out there consistently, but I do think they want both of these guys to be prepared in case they do need to be out there. Like we were saying earlier after practice, with the money, Riley Reif is going to be their starter unless he's really not able to hold it down. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of a competition even entering the season.
And then we got to touch on the quarterbacks. I mean, this might be the latest I've ever gone into one of these shows, 28 minutes. We haven't touched on the quarterbacks. But your initial thoughts on Mac Jones through 3 days?
I think Mac Jones has looked good. There were some times yesterday where I thought his ball placement was kind of off, where there just weren't catchable passes. I think that also had to do with, they're still installing things. They're trying to get on the same page. So I wouldn't blow that up because there haven't been a lot of egregiously bad ones. Today, I thought he rebounded really well. Like, he was just throwing into suffocating coverage. So if you look at his stat line, like, this is the key between Zappe and Mac. It's, the stat lines look a certain way, but look at the context because Zappe throws underneath a lot. And usually Mac is trying to take the tougher throws and, grow and see what he can do, what he can't with the guys around him. So, in terms of Mac Jones, like, no, he's not lighting the world on fire, but I think he's doing what you would expect from him at this point in the program.
I would say for both of them too, just, you look at the camp numbers. I think the camp numbers are a little objective. Like you said, 1 for 1 versus 0 for 1. Okay, well, one guy checked it down to the running back. The other guy tested the back shoulder throw on the pylon. And both quarterbacks today. And honestly, for Trace McSorley too, a lot of drops today. You had Demario Douglas had not Demario Douglas, he didn't. The other rookie, Kayshon Boutte, had a couple. Devontae Parker had one. I forget, somebody had a really bad drop with Trace McSorley. I don't remember who it was. It was one of the
maybe
bottom of the roster guys.
I don't want to throw somebody's name out there if they didn't. So
that's why. It was Anthony Ferkser. It was Anthony Ferkser had the drop from McSorley. So like you don't know too. It's like the quarterback didn't miss the throw. He put it right on his hands and he missed it. So that stuff's always a little subjective. But yeah, I thought a better day for Mac today. Again, I don't think he's quite where we want him to be yet, where they want him to be, where he wants to be, but look, we shouldn't be comparing it to last year because the bar is so low when you do that, but you have to compare it to last year. And he never got to this point last year where we can say, hey, this is 2 days in a row now he's improved. I don't know that he had 1 day in a row last year where he improved or the offense as a whole improved because it was such a mess. Whereas now it's like, all right, it's still probably not where it should be, but I can see what they're building towards. I can see what the plan is. I can see what they're working on. And it's just a matter of everybody getting on the same page and building up that consistency.
Yeah, we just can't really expect anything near perfection. But like, I think all this needs to be taken with a grain of salt. You know me, I'm usually the optimist in these situations.
Yeah.
But realistically, we keep hearing players talk about how much, again, trust, time, and communication. Like this has been something we've heard consistently, and that's still growing. And at worst, we've seen what Mac Jones was as a rookie. You know, he's someone who can help take them to the playoffs at worst. Now, year 3, Bill O'Brien, and then again, like I mentioned with Juju, he mentioned yesterday, it's like fix it, fix it, fix it. Find what's wrong, get the solution. So, you know, it also, there's so many offenses around the league that are starting where you had an offensive coordinator already, you know your supporting cast, or you're just like a freak of nature like a Patrick Mahomes or like a Josh Allen where, like you can walk onto a football field and have a good amount of success because you're just that kind of guy. Mac isn't. So this is going to be a process. I think it's too early to say whether, you know, season's doomed or whether, you know, X, Y, Z. I think you just got to take the good and with the bad, keep an eye on it and see if it's something that develops. And like we said, yesterday didn't have a great day. Today, the balls were where they needed to be. And for Mac Jones, that's really what you expect. Like he's the distributor, he's the game manager at worst. And I think that, you know, he at least filled that role from what we've seen.
And I think the most telling thing, again, to go back to kind of comparing it to where they've been, Mike Gesicki after practice was asked what's been the biggest thing that stood out to him about the Patriots offense being here in year 1. He said discipline. He said we haven't had guys false starting. We haven't had guys lining up in the wrong spots. And I don't know if he knows how big those comments are in the context of everything, but it's like I go back to that practice last year. It was like the 4th or 5th practice. They had their first 2 padded practices, and normally that's when you really start to ramp up. And then they come out the next day. They weren't even in shells. They were in T-shirts and shorts. And they did this whole walkthrough that really just kind of felt like, all right, we got to go back to square one and see where this thing isn't working. Whereas this year, it's like you said, that progress is being made and there are new things that they're going to have to work with. The other thing too, not even as an optimist, just as a guy that understands football, and you understand football too, and you know the value in this. These are non-padded practices. A week from now, they'll mean almost nothing because the padded practices are weighted so much more. And then we'll get to the padded practices, then we'll get to joint practices, and then we'll start to forget about the padded practices.
And so the preseason games,
right? There's actually, I rank the joint practices ahead of the preseason games personally.
That's totally, especially because a lot of the time, if the joint practices are good, they won't even play. So yeah, that's a great point.
Well, I've just heard Bill say it. I've heard Bill say that in some sense, the joint practice, because you can set up certain situations, you can set up certain environments that you might not get in the game, so you can really evaluate players in the way you want to evaluate them. So. I'm one of those guys that's like, yeah, all right, if Bill says it. If Bill says these practices are more important, he's got a bunch of rings. I don't have it. I don't have any from the Patriots or from football anyway. I'll trust Bill on that one. So speaking of the padded practices, there will be one more shells practice Sunday, and then we'll get into the pads Monday, Tuesday, and on from there. What are you looking for once the pads come on?
Run game. Just like Ramondre Stevenson, he said, I'm the kind of running back who likes pads. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to Monday. The run game, I think we talked so much about the pass game, and that makes sense because of how bad it was last year. But I do like their stable of running backs. I think they could still use somebody else. May not be Dalvin Cook necessarily, but even like a 4-net, to take the load off Ramondre Stevenson and give you someone who's proven, take some of the pressure up here, Strong, who has gotten a good amount of reps, and I think that's significant.
He's been very involved,
Yeah, so that's, and you love to see
Strong.
That.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know there's some people who thought, they drafted him and they quit on him. They always redshirt running backs. That's what they do. I think Pierre Strong's kind of setting up for a big role if they don't sign in somebody else Cook going to New York. It sounds like that's probably going to happen. So Fournette, you mentioned, I like Fournette too. What do you think of Zeke? Because Zeke's kind of been my guy because he's so smart. And I don't think people realize how young their running back room is. Ramondre's the veteran at entering his third year.
And he said he wasn't a veteran today. He was like, I'm not a veteran. It's my third season.
and Zeke's seen so much ball. I don't think he gets enough credit for his football IQ. I know a lot of people think he's washed. I know a lot of people think he's out of shape. If he would take a 10 to 15 carry a game kind of role, though, like, I love that idea. How would you feel about that?
I dig it. I think he could do well in that role, but honestly, that's not even something I considered. And you got to think of not even the fit, because Juju, when you're looking at free agency, I don't think anybody was saying Juju, great fit for the Patriots.
Right.
Because, Zeke is kind of a guy who's out there a little bit. Nothing wrong with that, but, the Patriots usually like their guys buttoned up.
They have a type. You could say it. They have a type.
Yeah, especially for a role player. Like, are they really going to want a press conference and all this media hype for someone who's going to be the very clear second running back, if even, makes it out of camp, depending on how other people emerge. So, I mean, I don't hate the fit. I think it would work. I don't know how they feel about it. But yeah, going back to what I'm excited about, the running back, seeing how the offensive line does, because that's where Riley Reif's going to shine. Riley Reif is not going to look good in pass protection. Riley Reif will look good when he's got his hands on guys. He can move them because he's a massive human being. So that's definitely the part that I'm really excited about.
He is Taylor Kyles. You can check out his work at clnsmedia.com and follow him on Twitter at tkyles39. We'll be back on Sunday. No pod tomorrow because there's no practice tomorrow, but we'll be back Sunday to kind of look ahead to the first padded practices. But until next one, Taylor, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate having you.
Thank you, brother. See you Sunday.
See you Sunday. For everybody else, I'm Alex Barth, 985thesportshub.com for more content. Subscribe to the Patriots audio feed and the Sports Hub YouTube channel. And enjoy the day off. I'll talk to you Sunday. Bye.